Okay, so welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. We're very pleased to see that we had so many people register from across the world for this talk. I'm going to start off with a quick introduction. I'm Jeremy Cohen from Imperial College London. I'm a Research Software Engineering Fellow, and together with a group of people, I've been involved in setting up this DiveRSE talk series, looking at supporting equity, diversity and inclusion within the RSE community. I'm going to start off with just a quick few introductory slides. It'll just be sort of 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll take you through the schedule, and very shortly we'll start with the main talk. So the schedule for the session, we're expecting to run for about 90 minutes. We've got, after this introduction, a quick introduction from Matt Williams, who's representing the Society of Research Software Engineering, who are our kind of co-organizers and sponsors of this session. I'm very grateful to them, and particularly to Marion, who will be speaking a little later, for their help in getting all this set up. Then we'll have the main talk, which is, I'm sure, is what you're all here to hear Marianne's talk, which we're all very much looking forward to, and a bit of time after the talk for Q&A, and then we will move to breakout rooms for some breakout discussions, which I'm sure will be really interesting too. So we'll have about 25 minutes or so for breakout discussions. Then we will all come back to the main room for some closing remarks at the end of the session. So just a few announcements. The meeting is being recorded. We will be recording the active speaker and the slides. So I'd ask you all to remain muted during the talk, and that will ensure that it's only recording the speaker and the slides. During when we get to the breakout sessions, we will stop the recording, so nothing will be recorded for the discussions there. But for the main part of the meeting, it will just be recording the slides and the speaker. So just to briefly say something about the series. So the DiveRSE series, it's linked to a workshop, this workshop Vive la Différence Research Software Engineers, which is being held at the Lorentz Center in the Netherlands in kind of mid-April. And what we wanted to do, as this workshop has capacity for around 50 participants, is to be able to bring the talks and the discussions and the general kind of material from that workshop to a much wider audience. So this is the first talk in a series where we hope that we'll be able to kind of open up those discussions and provide opportunities for you to engage with the material in a much wider level, to let a lot more people get involved and to join the discussions that are taking place there. So this is just the first of what we hope will be a series of several talks, and we'll be bringing you some of the other speakers from the workshop in future talks. But equally, we're also open to other people who perhaps haven't been able to get involved with the workshop. If you're working in the area of EDI within the research software engineering space, and you have a material that you think people would be interested to hear, we're very, very keen to hear from people. So do please feel free to reach out if you would like to look at possibly giving a talk in this series. Okay. I must highlight the code of conduct. The code of conduct is on the DiveRSE website. There's a link there at the bottom to it. So I do encourage you all to please familiarize yourself with the code of conduct. I'm sure if you go to lots of events, you're probably fairly familiar with these, and you will find that this is probably very similar to many of the other codes of conduct that you've seen, but I do encourage you to go and take a look. But of course, the general gist of this is that we should all behave nicely to each other, consider other people in the discussions that we have, and so on. Obviously, as I say, there's much more detail if you go and take a look at the web page. But thank you to everybody for considering that and for abiding by that as part of this session. Just very quickly to thank in advance the organising team who have done a great job in helping to get this set up. Several contacts that we have who have promoted this internationally. We've had more than 100 registrations. We're really pleased with the number of people who have registered. Of course, I want to thank very much in advance Marianne for agreeing to give this talk, because I know that she's also going to be doing this as part of the Lorentz Center workshop. And to thank the Society of Research Software Engineering, who have been helping us with supporting and co-organizing the event. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Matt Williams, who's going to say a little bit about the Society.
So, welcome everyone. Thank you, Jeremy. So I'm Matt Williams. I'm the current president of the Society of Research Software Engineering, and I'm also a research software engineer at the University of Bristol in the UK. Now, the Society is really happy to be helping to support and promote this event today, because the Society is a registered charity in the UK, and we have a couple of aims, primarily to advance education and also to promote and advance research. Now, we try to do that as broadly as possible, of course, specifically within the remit of research software and how computing and research intersect. But we're always interested in trying to take that message as widely and broadly as we possibly can. And we do this in a number of ways. We primarily do this by supporting the community of RSEs, not just in the UK, but around the world. And various ways that we've been trying to do this. So we've been trying to work hard to understand and measure and really get to the grips of the diversity of our community. And we've been working particularly hard recently to improve this situation, and supporting this event, I think, is a really useful way that we can be doing this. So we're really happy to be brought on board. And I was going to thank Marion, our EDIA lead, for doing all the hard work from the Society side, getting everything put together so that we're able to help out like we can. Now, you might have seen on Twitter yesterday, the RSE movement had its 10th birthday. So 10 years ago was when we came up with the term research software engineer. I say we, I only joined about 6 years ago. And it's really given a lot of people a home and a place where they can feel part of the community, find like-minded people who they can work with and share ideas and concerns with. So yesterday we saw people all around the world tweeting about what the RSE career and the community has meant to them. I think this shows why we need to keep on working to ensure that when we get to 20 years of RSE, we have even more voices, better diversity, and more people involved and speaking up about how they've felt supported and have supported each other. We also provide funding to members of the Society. So if you have an event you want to run or an initiative you want to get started, particularly if you see something in the talk today which sparks an idea, do feel free to get in contact with us at the Society. We have this events and initiatives funding, which is available to all of our members. So if you'd like to join as a member, membership is open to anyone around the world. We're not just restricting ourselves to members in the UK. It's £20 membership a year. So with that, you get access to things like the events and initiatives funding, as well as things like our mentoring scheme. So we're currently running a mentoring scheme. We've got a whole set of mentors and mentees currently going through the process. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to run this again next year. So please do sign up to our mailing lists and get involved if that's something you think might be useful to you, either as a mentor or as a mentee. Likewise, we have a very good and wide and vibrant Slack community with lots of people around the world talking on both technical and non-technical topics. So if you'd like to get involved with that, that's all at that Society RSE/join us link on the slide there. And finally, big news, we are running our annual conference again this year. After 3 years of not being able to see each other in person, we're going to be getting together in person for a conference with talks and workshops and all sorts of good fun things, and physically meeting each other face to face, which I think is a really important thing that we've all missed recently. So that's going to be happening this September. So again, head over to that website there, and there's all the information you'll need about how to get signed up to get notified about things. And our talks submissions are now open. So if you've got anything you'd like to talk about, head over to that website and we'd be very happy to receive your submission. Apart from that, I'd just like to say thank you again to Jeremy and to Marion for getting all this set up, and to everyone else on the organising team. And I won't take up any more of your time, and I'll hand over to Marianne. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeremy and Matt. I'm delighted to be here as part of this diverse series, and just really excited to share with you some ideas that I have about normalizing inclusion by embracing difference. So we can advance to the next slide. But before we get started, what I'd like to do is to do a little poll. So just to get to know who's out there. I'm really pleased to see that we had a great response to this talk, and that we have quite a few people out there. So if you go to that URL that's shown on the screen there, you can log into this poll. I'm using a tool called Poll Everywhere. Okay, so the first question is, where are you joining us from today? So I know that there's people from all over the globe looks like we have a lot of people from the US, from Africa, from Europe, and also from Asia. So yeah, big concentration from people all over the globe. So that's pretty exciting. So if you stay on that poll, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question. And the question is, what field is your training or background? We have, okay, it looks like we're pretty much stabilized. We have 19% in the life sciences, 25% in computer science, 4% in the humanities, 10% in engineering, 8% in mathematics, and 27%. So the top is physical sciences, 27% and 6% for something else. Okay, great. So we have quite a diversity of backgrounds, technical diversity. I'm going to move on to the next question, and that is, what is your preferred programming language? C++, Java, Fortran, something else. So something else is the most popular. So clearly I've guessed the wrong most popular languages, but we're just playing around and see what we've got here. So it looks like, okay, all right. 21% are saying C++, and 79%, 77% is something else. Okay, so we have, I'd be curious what those languages are, but I didn't set up this poll for that. But clearly we have some diversity there. So next question, what is your gender? Curious about that's getting into some of the demographics of the participants. And let's just see, the choices are female, male, non-binary, or something else. And give you a second to fill out the polls. So this is quite interesting. We have 49% female, 49% male, and it looks like percent of something else. We have something non-binary or something else as well. Okay, now things have shifted, and the females are in the majority, just by a little bit, 50% to 48%. Let's go on to the next question. So now we're going to explore a little bit about race and ethnicity. So just asking, what is your race? Choices are Asian, Black or African American, Caucasian, Hispanic or Latinx, Native American or Indigenous, Pacific Islander, multiple races, or something else. Okay, give you a minute to respond here. And let's go. All right. Looks like we've stopped getting answers. So we have 10% in the Asian category, 4% Black or African American, 65% Caucasian, 10% Hispanic or Latinx, 4% multiple races, and 8% other. Okay, great. On to the next question. Do you have a disability? Yes or no? All right. I'm letting you guys, thank you guys for responding and participating here. I'm just watching the numbers and letting them stabilize before I share the results. Sorry, you can't see them on your screen. Okay, it looks like we are stabilized in our answers, and we have 20% with yes and 80% with no. So we do have representation here as well. Here's another dimension that we tend to look at, and that is whether or not you're a first-generation scholar. That is, are you the first in your family to go to college? And this is an interesting dimension to look at, because for people who are first generation, so the first in their families, they have different challenges, right? So there isn't someone ahead of them in their family that's telling them, you know, the ropes and how to get there and the path, and maybe not having role models. There's all different challenges of being a first generation scholar as well. So thank you again for answering. Looks like we're pretty well stabilized here. We have 24% who are first generation scholars and 76% who are not. Okay. So here's a fun one. What's your preference for a hot beverage, tea or coffee or something else? And of course, you know, we might have lots of other things in the something else. I wish this tool allowed us to have fill-in answers, but very interesting as well. So it looks like we're getting close to stabilizing. All right, so we have 27% tea drinkers and 58% coffee and about 15% something else. All right. All right. Okay, so that is the end of the polls for now. So we can go back to the slides and go on to the next slide, please. All right, so with that, we have an idea of kind of who's out there and what I'm really excited about. I know Jeremy and the rest of the organizers did a lot to try to get the word out all across the road. So we know there's people from all over the place with different backgrounds and whatnot. And this is going to be a great opportunity for you to get to know each other and talk informally in the breakout sessions. So the way I've organized my talk, we'll talk a little bit about the Vive la Défense workshop itself and kind of setting the context for my discussion today. I thought it would be important to just start out by kind of, you know, setting the stage and talking a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion, also known as equity, diversity, inclusion, and then another term that is used as well is JEDI for justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. I'm sure there's lots of other ways, but here's just a few examples. And then I'm going to try to talk a little bit about how we could achieve DEI in RSE teams, and then what it would mean to embrace difference to normalize inclusion. And by normalizing inclusion, I mean making inclusion the norm. So everyone that's there is really part of the team and functioning. So go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So I was absolutely delighted and honored to be asked to be part of this wonderful workshop that's being organized. What is really exciting about the workshop is that one of the kind of main ideas behind it is to try to examine whether it's possible to reframe RSE where DEI is a central organizing principle. And how cool is that? To, you know, RSE, as we saw, happy 10th birthday, by the way, to the RSE Society. It's a relatively new field, and it's, of course, highly inter and multidisciplinary, and meaning there's a lot of technical diversity. We saw that already in the polls today. There's a lot of different technical backgrounds and technical diversity that's represented in the RSE community. And because of that, RSEs, of course, have to become adept at speaking, shall we say, multiple languages, whether that's different programming language, different domain languages, or just being speaking the different cultural languages based on all that technical diversity. And so RSEs have to learn to navigate, and not just navigate, really exploit technical diversity to create a really wonderful environment to do research and to accomplish research, which really otherwise would not be possible. So you might think naturally, would this adeptness at technical diversity translate to other forms of diversity? And that's what I'd like to try to explore a little bit, because you would hope that you know, the community has already learned how to navigate a certain dimension of diversity. Now we're going to go back to another poll. So if you can, it's really the same poll. So you can, if you were logged in before, you can go back to that poll, and you can see the next question is describe your work environment. Are you a lone RSE? So you're just kind of one RSE amongst a bunch of other, you know, people that are not RSEs. Maybe they're you know, experimentalists or other, you know, scientists or engineers, or are you part of a team of RSEs? Or maybe something else, some other configuration. So very interesting. Okay, so I'm watching the numbers come in. They're bouncing around. Thank you for participating in the polls. So it looks like right now we are all, oh, no, okay, changing a little bit. Go ahead. We were almost even there, but now as more answers are coming in, it's changing a little bit. Looks like we have stabilized. So we have, okay, so 26% are lone RSEs, 42% are working in a team of RSEs, and 32% are something else. So that's quite interesting to me. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question. And that is, how much technical diversity is there in your team? So when you're working on these teams and working on various projects, how much technical diversity is there? So the choices are very little. We're mostly all from the same technical field. Kind of in the middle is some, and then on the other end is a lot. We have people from an array of different technical areas. So go ahead and just let us know what your experience is of your teams. Yeah. Okay, watching the answers come in. So pretty much stabilized here. So in terms of very little, only 2% are reporting very little technical diversity. And then 16% are rating 2, 39% are some, 20% rating 4, and it looks like 26 a lot. So some to a lot is the predominant answer here. Okay, we're going to go on to another question. How easy is it to bring someone from a new technical area to your team? Is it difficult, very difficult, or extremely easy? So someone who's in a new technical area, you want to bring them onto the team, how easy is that process? And we're kind of on a scale from very difficult to very easy, extremely easy, and just kind of curious what your experience is. Okay, looks like we're pretty stable in our answers. So very difficult, we have 10%. The choice of 2 is about 35%, moderately easy 44%, 4 is 9%, and extremely easy 2%. So moderately easy is the predominant answer, and so somewhere somewhere around there. So some difficulty, but maybe a little bit easier to bring someone from a new technical area into your team. All right, next question. So this is kind of an essay answer, sort of, just short answer. So you can put in an answer to this question in a word. What techniques have you used to facilitate the integration of new technical areas or people from different technical areas? Okay, very good. So I saw pair programming, small projects, using a playbook, onboarding, seminars, transparency, knowledge transparency, documentation, mentoring, knowledge. We're getting lots of great answers in here, and we're seeing kind of what is the predominant ones so far: documentation, mentoring, workshops, reviews, seminars, lessons, engagement. That's a really good one. Something guided, unfortunately with this tool, the words get separated, so you can't tell which words go together, but we see which words are being used most often. But yeah, conversations, courses, touring, session lessons, lots of great ideas. Wikis is another really good one. Very nice. So templates, that's another one. Making easy tools for people to jump on and join the team. So that's wonderful. Thank you all for all of those great ideas about how you're trying to facilitate integration for new technical areas. So the next question is, what are some of the barriers to bringing in new technical areas? So you're going in to start a new project and you're trying to bring in some new expertise for the project for whatever reasons. what are some of the barriers? What makes it difficult? So experience, so needing experience, presumably, jargon, the time, quality, fragmentation, so having too many things to do, and also trying to bring on some new things, old experiences, right? So that's one that I think is really quite common, having old ways of doing things, but when you're bringing on something new, you have to change a bit, right? So working is very common there, but I suppose there's words that go with that. Old experiences, complexity, hard processes, documentation, seemingly intimidating, even if not, right? So that's a good one. So maybe it feels like really intimidating to try to put on board some new technical areas or whatnot, but maybe it's not so much, but initially it does appear that way. So very good. Okay, thank you all for answering those questions. Those are really great insights to some of the techniques to facilitate, as well as how to, what are the barriers that you have to overcome. Okay, so with that, we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. I would suggest that our challenge is applying what we know. So clearly we know something about how to embrace technical diversity to other forms of diversity within the RSE community. And that's what I'll kind of direct my discussion to next. So we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. I thought it would be useful to just start by kind of setting the baseline of, defining some terms. And I just went to a very, very simple way of, let's say, okay, let's think about this diversity, equity, inclusion, and just what are we talking about? So according to Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, diversity is the condition of having or being composed of different elements. So having variety, right? So clearly there's a lot of variety in this webinar in terms of technical diversity in some other areas. Whereas equity is defined as justice according to natural law or right, and specifically freedom from bias or favoritism. So I'll talk a little bit more about this, but that's an important distinction from diversity, of course. And then inclusion, of course, is the act of practicing and including and accommodating people who have historically been excluded because of race, gender, sexuality, ability, many other reasons or dimensions or ways to exclude people. That is what we're trying to look at in terms of inclusion. So go ahead and go on to the next slide. So again, kind of setting the baseline, I thought I would share some of the data that's available through the Software Sustainability Institute. I know they've been doing surveys for a number of years and making it publicly available, which is really wonderful to do it because it's really important to count and to understand what the community is made up of, and to them to share that publicly as well. So you can see there's data from across the globe in terms of gender. There's reporting on how many males there are. So from there you can infer other data about females or non-binary or something else, the age range and the qualifications. And so we do see that, of course, certainly just looking at one dimension of gender, there isn't so much diversity. Little bit more in terms of the age of people and their educational qualifications. We can go on to the next slide. So again, I just want to go back and talk a little, just for a moment, about the difference between diversity and inclusion, because a lot of people, talk about the pipeline versus, there's kind of recruitment versus retention in old terms. And I like this quote from Verna Myers, which is, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. So there's a big difference there. So we, first of all, want to focus on getting the diversity in the community. So we have a lot of difference. And then we want to make sure that that diversity is what I would claim exploited, that you take advantage of the diversity for the good of the whole. So we could go on to the next slide. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how that might be possible to achieve DEI within the RSE teams. in order to promote productive and inclusive teamwork. So on to the next slide. So apparently I like quotes, so I'll share this other one that I found in this Leadership in Science and Technology Reference Handbook. It's really a lovely quote, and it's talking about cultivating teams. And the quote goes like this: "It is said that truth shall set us free. Yet we need freedom to discover the truth. Thus, leaders in science and technology must accept responsibility for the results of their work and for the means they use to accomplish it. Fundamental to that responsibility is respect for facts, for creativity, and for colleagues." So we go to the next slide. I'd like to focus in on that last sentence there. Fundamental to that responsibility is respect for facts, for creativity, and for colleagues. And I'd like to just ponder this a little bit in terms of how we might cultivate respect within RSE teams. On to the next slide. So we'd love to do that. Historically, it's been difficult to try to cultivate respect within teams for colleagues who are from underrepresented groups. So now I'm talking about some traditional demographic components that you might look at. And the reasons are that it's been elusive is because of the common sources of attrition. And that those are listed here as bias and discrimination. So that's the converse of equity, right? Because often, so when we look at the numbers of the current community, very heavily, populated by a demographic of a particular kind. That means the ones who are not part of the majority group tend to have feelings of isolation. I'm the only one that's there. That looks like me or is from my background. And related to that can be having a lack of role models, not seeing people that look like you to look up towards and to kind of follow behaviors. Although of course someone doesn't have to look like yourself to be a role model, but we have to have role models. We have to have confidence in the social capital to be really fully functional. There's other things which are, of course, well documented, things like imposter syndrome. And unfortunately, there are situations where there is actual explicit harassment. I think we're getting much better on this front, but that has been something that has been a barrier. So on to the next slide. Thank you. So the good news is that we can change things, right? So we can change things as individuals, as leaders, and as systems through our policies and practices. Basically, these inequities are by design, so we just need to redesign them, right? The bad news, of course, is that change is hard, right? So another quote up there, people are very open-minded about new things as long as they're exactly like the old things. So we like to think that about innovation and whatnot, but we really are creatures of habit. And so it really takes concerted effort to try to change things, especially when our old habits are extremely successful. They've gotten us to a place which is a really good place. So why should we change them? So why should we change them is a good question. And so what I'd like to propose is kind of a thought experiment that I dreamed up, and it's just this kind of idea or an analogy, which I call coordinated self-assembly. And I would posit that if we try to adopt this principle when we're organizing teamworks or when we're trying to reframe RSE with DEI as a central organizing principle, that perhaps we could achieve something really pretty amazing. So on to the next slide. So during graduate school, I had a really wonderful opportunity to take a little side trip out of my main technical area, which is quantum computing, do a little bit of learning about dendritic structures and this process of natural self-assembly. So these structures happen in nature. They're pretty amazing. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. They go from snowflakes to leaves. They're very complex. and intricate and extremely functional. They do very important things for the organism. And also what's really amazing is they happen naturally, right? And so here is an example of what I call coordinated self-assembly. And this is in the example of carbon nanotubes. And so what's really, to me, really quite amazing is that scientists have figured out how to take this natural process of self-assembly, and self-assembly being how molecules and atoms will naturally come together to form other structures. And they have created carbon nanotubes. They do that by vapor deposition, so they vaporize these carbon atoms, and then they fall together into these beautiful structures that are very strong, and they form these sheets, and then they nudge them into tubes. And of course, the tubes have been extremely useful for things like, very directed drug molecule delivery and various other things like that. So lots of uses for that. So that is what I would call coordinated self-assembly in the sciences. That's an example. So next, I'd like to look at an engineering example of coordinated self-assembly. And for this, we'll cross our fingers, we'll be able to play a video to show this really neat project where they have managed to develop some pretty amazing structures from an engineering standpoint. So they take these individual, structures, and they join them together into something that I think is pretty impressive. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video. I always am breathtaking when I see it. I think it's pretty amazing. I'm not an engineer, so I get pretty excited about that. But in any case, I think this is an illustration of the same concept that I'm talking about. And here it's coordinated self-assembly. So I don't know if you noticed, but they had magnets. So the robots came together on their own and they sort of self-assembled. But also what was really interesting about them was that they assembled into different structures, right? And they were really pretty darn amazing at what they could do together. On their own, they flailed away, but together they created these unique structures, presumably for a particular function, and they functioned perfectly together, right? They were all doing their own job and doing something pretty amazing. But one thing about those structures is they were all homogeneous, right? They were all the same structures, right? But they just came together and ended up having different functions because of the way they were put together. Here's an example of an inhomogeneous robot. where this robot is made of lots of different parts, right? And they're very diverse, right? There's a camera, there's a structure which allows it to propel, there's other structures that are, moving different parts. So they're a very inhomogeneous robot, but yet again, it's kind of this idea of putting these different parts together in a way where they are working together to make a really great whole. So on to the next slide. So then, of course, I come back to the idea, well, what about applying this idea to teams, for our teams, bringing diverse people together and trying to apply this concept, let this self-assembly process happen, but exploit the diversity. So on to the next slide. What would that be like? What would it look like to try to have a coordinated self-assembly implementation of a RSE team around the concepts of DEI? So I think what it would mean would be that you would have teams of people from diverse backgrounds, from the many dimensions of diversity that you could imagine. That all the team members were fully functional. So they are really, really part of the team. They're interacting, they're contributing, they're being heard. You're taking advantage of the difference, because remember, different people have different ideas, different ways of doing things, and that you take advantage of that for the greater good of everything. And all the parts, shall we say, are fitting together. So the team really comes together and they're all working together, and the sum of those parts is a greater whole. Yeah, there we go. So what might this take? So that's a wonderful dream to imagine. So what are some of the things to consider in terms of how we get there? So I think it's important to consider kind of our starting state. No matter what dimension you look at in the DEI space, I think you're going to find that the numbers are low, right? And so this creates something as what I call the canary in the coal mine syndrome. And that, as you may recall, in the coal mines, what the miners used to do is they'd bring a canary in a cage and they'd put it in there and they'd see if it could survive, right? Because maybe there's some noxious gases and so they died. And that's how they could tell whether or not it was safe to be in the environment. And I would suggest that in a lot of cases in our environments, that is the case. You're the only one there. So in order for you to even consider going there, you're wondering, is it safe? Am I going to, not only am I going to survive, am I going to thrive? I need to thrive. I need to be a fully functioning member of the team. So what are the kinds of things that we need? If we go back to the quote that I shared from the leadership handbook, we need freedom, we need respect, and I would say you need inclusion. So that's ranges from belonging, just being there, feeling like you belong there, and having a safe environment for you to be your full self in that environment. Next slide, please. So in terms of creativity, freedom, respect within this EDI, DEI context, what does that mean? I suggest that it means freedom from bias, from isolation, from low self-efficacy, from just not being able to perform at the level that you're capable of performing, and having respect for each person's background and their differences and their needs. So what's holding us back? Well, we've got long-standing practices. We know change is difficult. We have an affinity for likeness. It happens. We see things that look familiar to us and we go there. And maybe we have some fear of something new or something different. But with all those things that are holding us back, imagine the rewards. We know that diversity, more diverse teams produce more innovation. We know that we have workforce challenges, that we've got a growing need for people with the technical talent to do the work. We have changing demographics, and we have increased competition for our talent. So those are all the things that we could overcome and be rewards for us if we try to adopt new approaches. So with that, I'd like to try to do a little bit of a exercise for everyone. And thank you all for hanging in with me on this so far and these ideas. And so there's going to be an activity that I'd like us to all try to do. It's really super easy, but I'm hoping it's a little way to try to explore this concept of similarity and difference. And so what I'd like is for everyone to use the tool to raise their hand. And then if you look if you have your participant pane up, you can see who everyone with their hand raised. So if you raise your hand, I'll give you all a second to find that button and raise your hand. Okay, good. Looks like we've got a bunch of raised hands. All right, so if you've got your hand raised, you're going to be participating in this activity. And so the first part of the activity is I'm going to ask you to start a private chat session. So you can do a message, and you can do a direct message to one person. Try to pick someone you don't know, and then start a chat session. And when you start your chat session, you can lower your hand so then you don't get picked by someone else. So unless you want to have multiple chats going on, you can do that if you're a multitasker. But the topic that I want you to explore is similarity. So I want you to start talking to someone who's out there, and what do you have in common? What is something you have in common? So these are strangers. So try to pick someone, like I say, you don't know, and just start talking with them through the chat, and find out, what do you have in similar? What do you have in common? So like I say, you can raise your hand, means that you're available for a chat. Lowering it means you're engaged in the chat. And so you can just pick someone, hopefully someone you don't know. There's a lot of people here from all over the globe, and just start chatting with them. So I'll give you guys a minute to engage in some chats and try to find out what kind of similarities you have. So if you haven't been picked, then you're welcome to pick someone else as well. Just start trying to engage with them. Maybe this is part of the lesson, is how easy it is. What happens when you're trying to engage with people? Are you feeling included? Is it difficult to try to reach out to a stranger and have a conversation about something? And here, we're trying to find our similarities. So if you're, in case you're missed any of the instructions, we're doing a partner activity where we raise our hands, and then we try to find someone we don't know, and we engage in a chat with them, and we lower our hands when we're chatting, and we're trying to discover what things we have in common. So I'll give you guys a few more minutes. I see lots of hands down, so I'm guessing that means you're chatting away, and I see other people engaged. It looks like in chat, so I'm glad. So you're having fun with this activity. So if you're looking for a chatting partner, you can look for someone who's got their hand raised. That's supposed to be the signal. I'm not sure if everyone's doing that, but yeah, feel free to chat with someone. Looking for similarities. In order to have a private chat, if you like, when you go to start chatting, you can select the person's name in the list. I think by default, it goes to everyone in the meeting. But you can just pick someone off the list and start a chat with them. Okay, so good. Lots of people appear to be chatting. So I am ready to see if people are ready to start chatting, talking about this this first part of the activity. I'd love to hear from anyone to see if you found some similarities and what that experience was like for you. Anyone like to share with the group, either in the chat or by just unmuting yourself and talking? Okay, great. I see that Miranda and James found out that they both have 2 cats. That's pretty cool. Guess what? I have 2 cats too. That's very nice. Thank you for sharing that, Miranda. I don't know if you want to share at all about how that conversation went and what it felt like, or was it easy or difficult? That would be something interesting as well. All right, so we did find that it was maybe a little difficult to find someone. So I see that someone tried to pick people, but they were already paired up. So I don't know what that means, if they had forgotten to and left their hand up or whatnot, but that might be the case as well. So any reflections on that activity? Quiet group, I know. Not maybe necessarily a surprise, but hopefully you found it a little something. So great. Okay, now we're getting more in the chat about this. So someone is saying it was easy to find commonalities with food. There we go. So you found a topic that you think would be easy for you to talk about and find a commonality. That's a great technique. Someone else found it fun. So then someone thinks it's easier to do in a breakout with just the other person. And that very well may be true. And we'll give you that opportunity since some breakouts are coming up as well. There is actually some research that says that doing it through kind of a more anonymous method of chatting does lower some of the barriers for some people and makes it easier to try to start engaging. So someone maybe felt a little nervous about reaching out to someone, and I totally get that. You know, it can be hard to like put yourself out there and try to reach someone. So anyways, so I think kind of in the interest of time, we should probably you know, end this activity at this point. Then I think Jeremy, you can help me here. I don't know if this is where you want to do a breakouts or okay, I'll just do my closing thoughts and then we'll go to the breakouts. So what does it mean to embrace difference or celebrate difference? So Vive la Différence is the workshop that this series is a part of, where we're trying to embrace difference. I would suggest that first of all, we need to recognize the many dimensions of difference and learn something about those dimensions, and figure out what are the barriers to trying to overcome those differences, overcome talking about them. So here we were trying to find similarities, and even that was a little difficult. Trying to discover differences might be even more difficult. I would suggest that it's important to truly understand the impacts of the difference. So what does it mean to have a disability, and how does that impact the work? How does it benefit the work? You know, there are many benefits and challenges to any kind of dimension of difference. And most importantly, I think it's really great to think about what can be gained, because we know that difference will produce more innovation. I think I have one more slide and then I'll stop. And that is that getting back to the beginning of this, you know, RSE is an amazing community. There's lots of technical diversity. The RSE community is really fairly young in terms of scientific communities, claiming and defining its place. So it's an ideal time and opportunity to try to take on the goals of the workshop, and that is to place DEI as a central organizing principle. And I think that could be facilitated by thinking about all the things that you do to embrace technical diversity and how that can be adapted to new dimensions of diversity. So with that, I will close and pass it back to Jeremy. Thank you all for your attention and for participating in my many polls and activities.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Thank you for a really interesting talk with some fantastic ideas, and I hope everyone enjoyed the opportunity to get a kind of hands-on approach with trying to talk to people and engaging with the polls. So what we're going to do now is go on to some breakouts, and I'm going to hand over to Marianne. And
So feel free to unmute yourself for a question, or to put it in the chat and I will read it out. Yes, Jeremy.
So while we're waiting if anybody else has got questions, I have a question for you, Marianne. I'm really curious how you feel that you know, some of the ideas that you've presented in the context of RSE, how are they things that you've seen work in other areas, and what are the kind of similarities? How can you kind of use ideas and approaches that you've seen in other areas within RSE, and how kind of transferable are they, if that makes sense, between the different sort of fields and areas?
Yes, that's a wonderful question, and a whole nother talk in and of itself. But so we do a lot of work now to try and we implement these ideas. So when we do work where we're bringing people into laboratories and trying to help them diversify their teams. And we do try to apply these exact principles where we really try to work on inclusion. So making sure that everyone on the team is included and feels included. And we do that in a variety of different ways. My style is to do it more as an active activity rather than just a training, kind of talking at people. And one of the things that I've written about, and I think is really important, is to think about that situation of the kind of starting state, the canary in the minefield, where you have someone who's the only one that's there. So we've developed some programs which allow the kind of balancing of what we call critical mass with integration. And so that is bringing together, you know, people in, like, for instance, I've worked in organizations where there's a couple women spread across, you know, several different groups. So we might organize activities to bring them together so they have a sense of belonging, and they're not so outnumbered. But then we do that in a way where it's done in an integrated fashion within the broader community and engage the broader community in that as well. I'm not sure if that if that really answers your question or not, but yeah, so there are lots of ways to actually implement this, and I would say that, you know, it applies in everything that you guys are doing within RSE and how you put your teams together, whether that's committees and how you run those committees. It's the policies that guide those activities as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So there's a question in the chat. What actionable things can I do today to improve DEI for my lab or team, especially given that I'm not a manager? I feel like what I miss from presentations is I leave feeling it's important, but I don't know what to actually do.
Right, very good. So I would suggest that what you can actually do is to think about these topics and to try to take actions yourself. So think about what's, you know, in your situation. How can you bring in someone from a different background? There's actions you can take yourself. So one of the actions is learning about someone who's from a different background, and what are the challenges and what are the advantages, and then advocating through your leadership to promote activities that will do this. So I get this question a lot about, as an individual, what can I do? And I really think that as individuals, we have a lot more power than you think you do. And one of the powers is influencing others and influencing leaders and influencing policies, as well as changing your own practices. So I think what naturally happens is that people, you're tasked with something and you say, okay, go find someone to do this. What do? you probably go to people you know and within your network, right? And what this is really all about is expanding that network and making strong connections in new ways with different people. So you're tasked with putting together a committee. Try to figure out how you can get outside of your network and bring someone in, and what can you do to make that person feel welcome, and so that they're really not just there, that they're really participating and contributing. What's unique about them that they can contribute?
Thank you. I would propose that we now go on to the breakout rooms, and Marianne had offered that she could walk through the breakout rooms as well. Maybe you have the possibility to ask her a question there as well.